In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Well, there's a growing movement of people that want to prove old Benny Franklin wrong about that. The death part, anyway. So, what is the longevity movement? Is there any science that suggests living indefinitely is actually possible? And what goes on at a longevity festival? All that and more on this week's Status Report. So longevity, really just living longer, is obviously not a novel concept. Some folks in the longevity movement are pretty much just trying to see how many extra years they can squeeze out of their time here before they shuffle off this mortal coil. And for the most part, they're doing it the old-fashioned way, by steadfastly avoiding things that are known to lead to an untimely demise, like smoking, drinking, eating a poor diet, and doing more things that can extend a lifespan, like exercise and managing stress and eating a healthy diet. But there is also a segment of people taking this to the extreme. Yeah, some of these people are straight up trying to never die.
I promise, I will never die.
My stat colleague Sarah Todd is really interested in this subculture, and she recently attended Vitalist Bay, a longevity conference/festival in Berkeley, California. And, well, just look at this chart. During her reporting, Sarah polled 45 speakers and attendees about how long they thought they'd live. As you can see, infinite/indefinite won here, and by a country mile. More than half expected to live longer than the longest living person to have ever lived, Jean Clément, hope I'm pronouncing that right, who died in 1997 at 122 years old. She met Vincent van Gogh as a teenager and lived to see the internet. Sarah's dispatch from this festival is truly one of my favorite stat pieces in a long time, and I spoke with her earlier about her experience at Vitalist Bay, the science of longevity, what the heck a bodyoid is, and more. But first, I have a confession to make. I kind of put on the best professional accent I can here on Status Report. Truth be told, I grew up in Somerville, Massachusetts, just outside Boston, just a hop, skip, and a jump from Harvard. And, well, reporter Emily Sweeney from Stat's sister publication, The Boston Globe, has been nothing short of a sensation lately by, well, just talking like she normally does, and not cowardly shying away from her roots like I have been.
A masked intruder broke into an $18 million waterfront mansion.
Awesome. This is a whole trend now that I just let roll by like Billy Buckner in '86. That said, Stat is a national publication, whereas the Globe primarily covers the greater Boston area. You know, God's country. So, I don't know, sound off in the comments if you think I should stick with my reporter voice, or if you think I should bring you all the news about RFK Jr., the latest discoveries from Harvard researchers, or whatever. Okay, let's hear from Sarah about her time at the Longevity Festival. Hey Sarah, thanks so much. Looks like we're matching today.
Yes, love to see it.
So, what's Vitalist Bay?
Vitalist Bay is a combination longevity festival / conference. It was launched last year in 2025 for the first time, and it's run by the Vitalist Foundation, which is a group of longevity enthusiasts who build themselves as anti-death and are looking for ways to extend the human lifespan.
You just attended the most recent one in Berkeley, California. Could you set the scene for us a bit? Like, what were the vibes like there?
So yeah, it was at a really lovely place called Light Haven, which is a former hotel. And so, wicker lawn furniture, really, really nice sort of lush bushes and trees and stuff. And then the people there, I went in expecting it to be maybe more like heavily white and male, sort of a tech bro type of environment. And there were definitely some people who fit that bill. But it was also, I would say, more diverse, both racially and gender-wise than I was expecting, which was a cool surprise.
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to say one of the things I found telling was there was a session called Longevity for Non-Billionaires, which feels like a pretty high bar, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was going to ask it's one of the a frequent criticism of the longevity movement is that it's kind of oriented toward wealthy people. But you said that not really the case?
Well, I would say it's true, certainly, that there are lots of billionaires who are looking to invest in ways that might help them live forever. That's happening. The people at the Vitalist Bay conference would say, actually, though, they think that those billionaires should be investing more because overall longevity research isn't as well funded as many other, compared to, say, cancer research or things like that. The people at Vitalist Bay, however, were largely, they're not, they're generally well off, but they're not billionaires. The people there were much more the type of people who you might encounter in a typical sort of San Francisco Bay Area environment.
Aside from the diversity, was there anything else that surprised you?
Yeah, well, I came in, I've read a lot of, articles about longevity, often focused on people like Brian Johnson. And I think that there's a certain tone of disbelief slash judgment that often kind of seeps into these articles. And for good reason, like the idea of like, oh, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping were caught on camera discussing the idea of like replacing their own organs and living forever. And, the idea of these very rich, very powerful people who have everything in the world just wanting to prolong their lives so they can keep ruling over the rest of us, that's going to get people's hackles up. But the people who I spoke with at this conference were largely, their concerns about lifespan I found much more relatable than what I often have read about. So, a lot of people were sort of thinking about health span as well as lifespan. I heard a lot of people say they wanted to be able to run a marathon at age 100. The idea being that many people have seen the failures of the U.S. healthcare system in action, where people are, maybe living into their 80s or 90s, but in poor health, and they're declining physically and mentally. And what they're really looking for are ways to make sure that they're in good health for as long as possible. And then I also found even the people who, have much more ambitious ideas about how long they'd like to live, whether 120 or 150 or indefinitely. I think that I found their reasons pretty sweet. Like one person said that he just wanted to be able to read all the books that he had on his list. Another person said that he really likes the dinner parties that he throws with his fiance, and he thinks the purpose of life is to create interesting experiences for others, and he'd like to just keep doing more of that. And I was like, oh, I think that the people who I spoke with there were coming at it generally from a place of just genuine enthusiasm for life.
So yeah, it sounds like you met a lot of interesting people. Was there anyone in particular that really stood out to you?
Yeah, so there were lots of interesting people. One person who I stopped and talked with was Kristen Glorioso. She is the founder of NeuroAge, which is a company that is supposed to help you test the age of your brain and then help you maybe hopefully make some changes to improve said age. And does this with a combination of MRI scans and blood biomarker tests. So this was an interesting example, I think, of a lot of what was going on at the conference, which was seeing how the commercialization of longevity is really getting off the ground. There are lots of businesses that are looking to help people try to prolong their lifespans by giving them more data and more information about their current health. So Kristen was interesting to talk to. She said that a big part of the inspiration for her in starting the company was that her own mother had Alzheimer's, and she had the gene for that. And so, monitoring her own cognition is obviously really important to her. And that was a common thread that came up with multiple people who I talked to at the conference. A lot of people had relatives who had dementia. And I thought that was very relatable reason for getting so invested in longevity.
On the other side of that, though, another thing that stuck out to me was when the venture capitalist kind of explained some of those health testing businesses.
Yes.
And said basically, you give one green thing and a couple red things, which is you let them know that they had one really healthy marker, but some not so healthy markers, and then you basically sell them on a subscription or some sort of intervention.
Exactly, you sell them on coaching. Yeah, and it
kind of feels like saying the quiet part out loud a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. He was just explaining what the business model is very straightforwardly without a sense of judgment, and I was like, oh, I don't know about that. And a lot of these biological clock tests are very controversial for a variety of reasons. Whether because maybe they're giving more flattering results to people, and also because even if your chronological age is 50 and your biological age is 40, let's say, that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't still get cancer and die. Like we have no evidence that that's really helpful information necessarily. So.
Well, I'm just curious, what was the reaction in the room when that happened? Were people looking at each other like that seems, or did they just kind of that was business as usual?
I think people were just nodding along. They were saying, "Yep, that's how that business model works."
Is there any research that indicates that living past what's kind of understood as the high end of the lifespan, roughly 120 years? Is there any scientific evidence that that's even possible, a realistic goal at all?
Yeah, this is an interesting matter of debate in the scientific community, and I don't think that we know for sure. So, as you said, right now we know that the outer limits of the human lifespan seem to be about 120 years or so. Um, but there is a contingent of people who think that maybe we're going to see people living longer than that in this century, and not necessarily even with interventions. And then there is another contingent of people who say, well, we know that there are other mammals that can live a very long time. Bowhead whales, I think, can live up to 200 years. So, science is always studying other animals and trying to learn from them. It's possible that we could make some discoveries that, whether through, some kind of cellular reprogramming or something else could significantly extend the human lifespan. But that's all conjecture at this stage. And there's no telling, like, if science did figure that out, how soon it would happen.
What the is a bodyoid?
A bodyoid is a fascinating concept that was new to me, but a big topic of discussion at this conference. So it's basically a headless sack of organs, and the purpose of growing one of these is that you would have, an animal like a pig without any consciousness, and then you could harvest the organs and use them to replace human organs. And there are a bunch of different types of potential uses for this. Like, it could be a simple way to help address the organ supply shortage, which is a genuine concern. And it's also potentially a more ethical way of doing xenotransplantation where, you're not harming conscious animals in the process of this. But then the sort of more radical ideas are like, could this be applied to human beings? Could we wind up having headless human bodies who, would then give birth to other headless human bodies via IVF? And that sounds very, I think, Twilight Zone-esque. There was discussion about both that possibility at this conference, but then Hank Greeley, who's a professor at Stanford, who often he specializes in law and bioethics, was saying like it was really hard for him to imagine the general public getting on board with human bodyoids for obvious reasons.
I could see that. I can see why.
But there are two companies that are currently working on bodyoids in animals.
So I think that's all I really have. Is there anything else maybe I didn't ask you or you'd like to share on the topic?
Well, I think like one thing that was really evident to me at this conference is that I think that there are a lot of people who are genuinely very, enthusiastic about longevity. I think that there's also a big field for businesses that maybe can take advantage of people's genuine desire to live longer. So I think I came away feeling like, I understood why people are interested in longevity a lot better, but I also was concerned about unproven supplements and various devices that can cost hundreds of dollars and subscription models that maybe aren't actually going to significantly improve anybody's health or give them a chance of living a longer life. I think that's the bigger danger in this field.
Yeah. And if you got a couple extra decades, what would you do with them?
Oh, great question. I think if I had a couple extra decades, one interesting thing that came up at this conference is that if we succeeded in extending the human lifespan, our whole society would have to change. We're really built for a certain length of living. So the average age of retirement, the way that we think about Social Security, all of those types of things would change. But assuming that I had enough money and I had a couple extra years of life, I think that I would really focus on creative pursuits. I'd write poetry and I'd try taking a sculpture class and I'd do lots of stuff that maybe right now I don't have so much time for. How about you?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is I've always said if there was an extra couple hours a day, I've never really been I never really played music or was any type of musician, so I think I'd try to pick up an instrument or something.
I love it. Rock star Alex.
Yeah. Some EDM DJ or something.
Totally.
Sarah, that was great. I love that story so much. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, it was really fun chatting with you. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks again to Sarah. That was a lot of fun. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It's a little click, but it's a big deal for us. And we'll see you next time on Status Report.